right. It's time to evaluate the Dolphins team position group by position group. You can do it all at once, but I don't think you can giving justice to actually evaluating each position group. So, considering what Chris Grier said today about the offensive line, which is a little bit like last year when he said fans are a little bit more worried about the depth of the offensive line than I am, I'm going to start off with the offensive line. I think I'm going to go from worst position group, get it out of the way, and then go move to the end to the most positive. So I'll do a little combining, tight ends and running backs maybe, or receivers and tight ends, and edge players and D-line, D interior. But that's what I'm going to do. Today, going to cover the offensive line, where it's at, some interesting quotes. I'm going to kind of have some graphics here and break it down. Since I started doing this thing 3.5 seasons ago, offensive line has been my number one topic. I think I'm known for that more than anybody. I love the offensive line in college. I would watch the offensive line coach. I understand the value of the offensive line. But the reason I fixate on it so much is because it's always been the weakest group of this team since I've been doing this gig here. And let's be real. Everything that Chris Grier said is there's truth to it as far as the scheme and Tua and working together and all this stuff plays a part. But the reality is the skills position, the philosophy, the play calls and scheme are going to have to uplift a very poor unit. Now, when everybody's healthy, in the right conditions, it's going to be fine. And we might actually end up blowing out a little bit better teams than we did last year and having more blowouts. But that's not how you judge this team. This team is based on real success. You're going to have to play on the road. Jets, Bills, Patriots, Kansas City, Ravens, the deal in the AFC. Play against the better teams and win a playoff spot. And so I'm going to get into the offensive line. I don't think we're doomed. I've told you that the tried and true philosophy is that throughout the history of the game, anybody who's ever played. And so it's kind of somewhat curious that Tua is saying what he said about, well, I don't care who's in front of me, I throw fast. He knows, we all know, everybody knows the offensive line, their blocking either enhances the skills position or tears it down. Or maybe even works in that middle ground where the skills are just operating in a neutral position. But it's the blocking in the run game, in the pass game, controlling the trenches is how the game's been won forever. Now, to Chris Grier's credit, he's shown a lot of cojones to say, to the historical foundational principles, and he's challenged it and created a unique roster of so much skill that it makes me say, well, I don't think it's going to work, but maybe. And that alone, I think, if you're a football fan or a Dolphin fan, is really shocking and exciting. But I do think it's a very long odds to actually get this thing to work to the highest level. Playoffs, I don't think it's that outlandish. Maybe a playoff win if it's home field. I don't think it's that outlandish. But certainly to go to Super Bowl, it would take us having home field advantage throughout or playing that, second round or third round in a conducive environment for us to win. So that's it, guys. I think as I wrap this whole thing up, there's 3 things we have to hold on to. 1, we don't know. We really don't. Even a guy like me who's old school, maybe you're very old school, or even if you're new school and you think it's going to work, we've got to wait to see. Certain things like Tehran, this is the most critical year for Tehran to stay healthy because he doesn't have the Connor or Hunt talent-wise to uplift this offensive line when he goes down. So does he stay healthy? He doesn't. There's so many little things along the way that we have to, A, keep an open mind and go week from week. B, you look at Jonnu Smith. Last year, he got 6.6 leverage yards, cushion yards from the defense. And you look to see what Waddle's getting and Hill, eventually OBJ, and you add in HN. There's a lot of leverage here with what Tua can do to uplift this very poor offensive line and maybe do some amazing things. but they're going to have to lift them up. And then 3, you got to be clear. This is a poor offensive line. I'm going to go through this unit here, and it is like shake and bake type of construction. And there's a lot of guys here that wouldn't even be backups anywhere in the league. And they're going to be considered starters or primary backups. So we have to see. It is very, very interesting. It is possible. It is a long shot. But let's dig into the offensive line. First off, here's the position group. You can see all the players here. Tackle, Teron Armstead, Austin Jackson, Kendall Lamb, Patrick Paul as the tackles. Aaron Brewer, Lester Cotton, Liam Eichenberg, Robert Jones, Andrew Meyer, and Isaiah Wynn on IR is the guards and center. So right off the bat, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You got 10 guys, right? 10 guys, 9, because Isaiah Wynn's out for who knows how long. Maybe 8, depending on if Brewer is there or not for week 1. And so it's a 9.5. I don't think I've ever seen this before, but I'm sure it has. But we have 9.5 offensive linemen to go into the season. Now, Teron is the key. My man Teron is unbelievable. The ability to play through pain, the pass block, to run block. Not the best drive block, but you can see PB pass block, RB run block. He's old. He's got injuries. He hasn't really practiced. It's not so much for him, but the guys next to him. But he is a guy you can count on. He's a guy who's going to make plays even at 80%. He's a guy that can soak up a lot of stuff and then send the protection down the line. But I've talked last year, you can kind of cover for one guy on the offensive line is not good. But when you start getting to 2 and 3, it gets very, very difficult. Austin Jackson. Last year there was, I'm sorry, Austin Jackson. Go check his play out at the end of the season. It wasn't good when he need to be relied on, when he didn't have certain guys next to him who were really good, and he had to carry more weight. And you have to understand, when you have an offensive line, the duties and responsibilities are spread out, and the stars, the better guys, carry more and take some of that burden off the lesser guys. But when those stars go down to the better players, then the next echelon of guys got to pick up the duty, and they've got to do more. And Jackson last year, maybe it'll change this year, we got to see, but last year he wasn't able to do it. CHP can't handle power. You'll see a lot of that. Can't handle power. And so he's not drive blocking. He'll be okay on the zone stretch. But in that inside zone running, when it gets down into the red zone where they're compressing the defense because they're not fearing the deeps, it becomes a problem for him to run block. Kendall Lamb, excellent backup. He's a pass blocker. He can't drive block. He's not good in run blocking. He's old, and he can't handle power. A good backup, don't get me wrong. And then everybody's favorite, Patrick Paul. Young, raw, not ready. I said that, and people are like, maybe you play guard. No, have you watched the film? And this was against guys that were backups and third stringers. But he has potential to maybe be a factor later on in the season. I still think that's early, and he's a great pick for us as far as investment in potential through the roof. The kid's an awesome kid, great face mask. You saw some good stuff. He can handle power. He can't be run through, and that's a huge asset if somehow he does have to step in. But he struggles in the run blocking because he can't really get off. Guys get into him, and he's young. He's raw. Good player, a little concerning if we have to depend on him too early. But Kendall Lamb will step in for Jackson or Armstead should one of those guys need a breather or go down. Let's hope not. So not a bad tackle group. It isn't. It really isn't, guys. You can do stuff with this. You've got a quality starter, although he's got to stay healthy. High-end star, I should say. You've got a guy who's passable, and maybe he takes another step. Kendall Lamb's an excellent backup, and you've got a very high potential guy sitting in the wings who brings the asset of handling power to a line that really can't. So I'm not terribly down on the tackle position, but it's the interior that is highly, highly, highly did I say highly concerning? Brewer's injured. Can't handle power. He's a mover, though. The guy moves really, really well, and that's good for what we want to do. That's not going to help in the red zone. It's not going to help when you have to drive block. He's going to need help from the guards, the power of the guards, to help offset his weakness, and he doesn't get that unless Robert Jones is there. He's nicked, and he's uncertain for week one. I think he might play week one. I do. I think so. I think one of the reasons they kind of like maybe moved off Driscoll a little bit and kept Meyer is because they intend Brewer to start week one, and they intend Eichenberg to be the guard, the starting right guard. Lester Cotton's not good. I mean, he's a great guy. But you listen to him, he's an awesome guy. I mean, this guy's a star in other lower leagues, but here he's just not ready. Big guy, he can't handle power. I don't know how many rosters he'd actually make in the NFL. And he's a primary backup. Liam Eichenberg can't handle power. He's versatile, but he's not good. I mean, Chris Kaufman and basically everybody showed he was on the ground 4 plays out of 11 or something like that. It's bad. Now, at center, it's accentuated. It's worse because he's more nervous. He's got one hand, he's got to snap and go. At the guard position, it's a 2-hand go, and it works better for him. It's a lot harder for him at center. But he's not a good guard, and he's going to be our starter. I don't understand how any sane person has Cotton and Eichenberg as their guards, and guys that can't handle power next to Brew, who struggles with power. I don't know. Robert Jones, big guy. He had a bad last game. It was a little concerning. They played him and not Eichenberg. And he didn't do well. And it was struggled really hard against the starters of Tampa. Struggled versus Tampa. And I don't know if it was a bad game or what. But he can handle power. He's a run blocker. He's a guy who can bring an asset to us in the red zone, in that phone booth setting. And he's had some very nice physical blocks. He's not nimble. He struggles to get to the second level, so he's a little bit of an incongruent skill set for our philosophy. Not terrible in the poll, but he's probably a backup for most teams unless they're power teams, and maybe he could play the right guard where he gets some protection. I like the kid, but as a left guard, he'll have some protection, but I'm not super high on him because that last game was a little concerning, and because he just can't get to that second level. I do like that skill set of the run power. And Andrew Meyer, I know people are getting high on him. He's not bad. There's some things like you could see him work on a linebacker, and he gets into him. He's got nice hand play. He's very mobile. There's some stuff. I'm going to do a no BS film study on him, among others. So there's a lot to like of what we're seeing, but he's a rookie, and he can't handle power. He can't. You can see it, and there's a lot of tells to show you he can't yet. But he is a guy I like in the mill as a developmental guy, and possibly a guy who could contribute for us later in the season or as time goes on. Mover, as I said, but still can handle power. Better than Driscoll, because Driscoll is not a good guard. He's not a good tackle. And remember, we released Driscoll today. Remember all the people saying Driscoll is a great signing, and he was really uplifted by the Eagles system, by all the talent around him. He's not that good. And Andrew Meyer is as good as him as a center, and better probably because he's a natural center. Nice little guy, but he would be my 10th. He would be my 10th. And then there's Isaiah Wynn. Isaiah Wynn can't handle power. His injury status is unknown. We don't know if we're getting him back. He's a decent second level guy. He can get to the second level, and he's very aware. And he can just get the hand there and chip a guy and turn and spin. But he can't drive block. And then that hurts him in when the time to throw goes up in the pass game. You can see him get driven back. But not a bad guy. He would be like my 8th or 9th. But he was considered a primary starter. And so we don't know when he's getting back. So this is your offensive line. And I dare you to find an offensive line of any contender that equals this. Now, again, if this works out, Grier and McDaniel are a genius. They have broken 100 years of like tried and true formula. And that's really exciting. But this is just looks a little, I mean, maybe we get another guy. I don't think so. The way Grier's talking, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into that right now. But if you look, you got to remember, when you're counting on your offensive line, you have your offensive linemen are the primary blockers, but then you have to add your secondary blockers. That would be the fullback and the tight ends. And so if everything was beautiful, this would be your starting group: Armstead, Jones, Brewer, Eichenberg, and Jackson, although you could flip Jones for Wynn if he shows up. But when you look at the tight end position, Jonu's a willing blocker, but he's not a good run blocker, a good pass blocker. Smythe's he's a willing run blocker, but not a good run blocker. He's a good pass blocker. Hill's a big jack guy who's willing, but he's not really able. Tanakana isn't any of that, but maybe he's gotten better. Ingold, sometimes he has a nice run block, a beautiful run block, but then it's followed by a bunch of questionable ones, but he's a good pass blocker. So we've got a lot of help with these guys through the pass blocking, but not really the run blocking. And so I'm going to tie this all together in the philosophy. So last year, the offensive line was so good, and I think Grier said, you guys wrote about how they've improved. They improved, guys, because the Dolphins dropped. They went from 2.35 seconds time to throw to 2.09, 2.08. Keeps going back and forth. They were in top 5 in screens, top 5 in play actions, and top 5 in time to throw. Those are 3 primary play calls or philosophies to uplift a struggling protection. You don't call those plays if your 5 guys are doing really good blocking. You don't need to keep all these extra guys in play action. You don't need to call all these screens to mitigate pass rush. You don't need to throw so fast. And blockers per pass was also pretty high in the league too. We kept extra blockers, and all that stuff constricts your ability to put guys out in routes, and it makes it more difficult. Now, Tua, I do believe that when OBJ gets in, he'll get more guys in routes short term, and he'll be able to go through his routes and deliver, but you can't always depend on the philosophy. Every fighter, a good fighter, they have a game plan, but at some point things go away from their game plan. And if they're a technical fighter, a fast fighter, they get into the corner. They get into a physical moment, and they've got to get out of it, or they've got to fight through it. And for us, we are unbelievable striker, but we've got a glass jaw. And, we've got to see how it plays out. But don't let anybody float you, man. This is one of the worst offensive lines, and this is before any major injuries. I mean, Austin Jackson goes down, Teron goes down, Brewer goes down again, and look what you got here. So this is a very risky gambit. I've said before, the primary thing that we need to evaluate is the team builder, the architect. Chris Grier pulls this off, and dude, he is, he's Houdini, dude. He's brilliant. I mean, he's thrown 100 years, as I've said, on its head. But if not, this was like almost brazenly stupid. It could be brazenly stupid. Teron goes down, and Brewer gets injured again. What do you got, guys? I still think if that happens, you can beat these average to lower teams just because of the skill level if the defense plays does its job. But man, this offensive line is closer to 2021, which I called the 45th best offensive line in football if Teron goes down. It's not as good as our prior 2 years. Hunt and Connor will be felt their loss. People talked about last year was an excuse because of the injuries, because Connor and Hunt went down. Well, they're not here this year. So the things you saw when they went down is the things pretty much you're going to see here, because Brewer's a little bit better, a little bit of an uplift. But let's be real. And this does not mean we're doomed, but we have to truly recognize what is happening, because if you don't, then you say Tua sucks and the running back sucks and McDaniel sucked. All this offensive line sets the difficulty level for all the skills and for the coaching. And this offensive line has been designed. part by McDaniel, but mostly by Grier, who dates back. I saw, somebody saying that even when Gase was here, Gase, remember Jermon Bushrod was our big get on the offensive line. Guy was past his prime, and a tackle moved to guard, and he wasn't that good. So this has been a philosophy for a very long time. Let's see how it plays out. Thankfully, the rest of the position groups as we go through this are going to get markedly higher. And so whatever happens this season, as I've said, season before and before and before, the season will be dictated. The ultimate outcome will be dictated on how these guys respond, how they play. And it should go right back to Chris Grier. And that's good and bad. He should be hailed as a genius or driven out like Frankenstein if it flops. So that's what you got, guys. Please understand the reality of this. I'm not trying to be mean in any way. I'm just trying to present good information and actuality. The rest of the league invests in the offensive line. We don't. And so you've got everybody going this way and one guy going that way. And if he goes that way, if not, Frankenstein with the torches. Curtis saying, be well, go Fins. Curtis out. Start building your own online sportsbook today by getting signed up with acebread.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.